The world is hurting right now, and it's time to rise up. As we lift ourselves up in body, mind, and spirit, we can reach out to others and be a light in a sea of darkness. Welcome to the Movement for Global Health with your host, Dr. Mary Zennett.
Dr. Dominic Brandy is a medical doctor with 42 years of experience. He has published 75 scientific articles, given over 200 lectures to an international audience, and has written 9 textbook chapters. 5 years ago, Dr. Dominic was diagnosed with an incurable blood cancer. He has an incredible story to share with us. It is our absolute privilege to welcome Dr. Dominic Brandy to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Looking forward to it.
So please start by sharing your story with our audience.
Well, I've had a plastic surgery / med spa / anti-aging center for over 40 years. And 3 years ago, a venture capital group came in and offered to buy the practice, the business, whatever you want to call it. At that time, we were ranked number 5 in the country by Allergan, the company that makes Botox. So it was a very successful practice with over 100 employees. A lot of stress. But my cancer story really started 5 years ago, which was two years before I ended up selling my practice, when I got diagnosed with an incurable blood cancer called multiple myeloma. And for your listeners, if they're not familiar with it, it's a cancer of the plasma cells. They're the cells that make your antibodies. And the way it all started the story actually starts 2 months before I got diagnosed. My wife and I were on a cruise. It was a 2-week Viking cruise, and I've read well over 300 books on health and nutrition in my career because I've had this anti-aging center. So it's always been an interest of mine. So when I go on a vacation, I always look for a book to read that has to do with nutrition. So I go on my Kindle and I see a book called How Not to Die by Michael Greger. I don't know if you've ever read it, but if you get the hardback, it's about 2 inches thick. Wow. And about an inch of it are scientific references. And that was the thing that really appealed to me about this book. It wasn't anecdotal. It just went through study after study. And what the science was showing is that cultures and research cohorts that eat more plant-based have much lower incidence of cancer, cardiovascular disease, dementia, diabetes, metabolic disease, really all-cause mortality. So I'm 2 days into this cruise, and I tell my wife, while I'm reading this book, I am going to start eating whole food plant-based. And she thought I was out of my mind because we're on this cruise with all these different meats and desserts and eggs and you name it. So I started eating. I'm one of these people, when I make a decision, I just go at it. So we come home, and it's at this point, it's the last week of September, and I'm doing surgery, and I feel a little pop in my right clavicle, and I didn't think a whole lot of it, but then it just kept getting worse day after day, and I started to get a little concerned. And then I remember very clearly, it was the last week of October. It was starting to keep me up at night, and it was really starting to really worry me. And I remember telling my wife, Trina, I think I have bone cancer. And she goes, "Oh, you're the healthiest person I know. Yeah, you're perfectly fine." So I kind of made me feel a little better. But it kept getting worse. And about a week after that, we were watching television, and I accidentally knocked over a container of water. I lunged for it, and my right collarbone just cracked right in half. It was really super painful, and scary. We went to the urgent care center. We got a X-ray. It was totally displaced. I got an MRI, and they found that I had a 3 centimeter, what they call plasmacytoma. They biopsied it. They did a bunch of different, blood studies, and they found that I had this multiple myeloma. And the type that I have is IgA kappa. There's 3 different types of myeloma. There's IgA, IgM, IgG. IgA, the one that I have, is the most aggressive. IgG is kind of in the middle, and IgM is the least aggressive. So when I went to the oncologist, he wanted to start me on this triple regimen of 2 oral medications and then this other medication called Velcade, where I would have to go in for shots into my abdomen. And when I was doing research on this drug, I found out that almost everybody that gets it gets some kind of a pretty severe peripheral neuropathy. And because I do surgery, I was concerned about my hands, being affected. So I told my oncologist, I said, "Hey, listen, I don't want to do this Velcade. I'll do the other 2 oral medications, but I'm not doing it." And he was very upset. He didn't think I was going to be able to get into remission without doing this Velcade. So he pulled me into a side room. There was another patient there, a gentleman, and he tried to get him to talk me into doing the Velcade. And that guy actually is a good friend of mine. We go out all the time now, so it's kind of weird how we kept in touch. But I came back and I told my oncologist, "Hey, listen, I'm not doing the Velcade." And at this point, I had already been eating whole food, plant-based for 2 months, and I was convinced that that was going to help me in this battle. And that was one of the other reasons that I felt that I wanted to forego the Velcade. So I just started taking the 2 oral medications, and this was about 5.5 years ago. And every month, my numbers just kept getting better. And by the 6th month, I was in a complete remission. I remember every month I posted to my Facebook friends, and they were just amazed how my numbers were just coming down. And so from that point, I'm still on 2 oral medications, but I'm on very low doses. Remember, it is an incurable disease, but I've been able to live an extremely full life. I have tons of energy. And what happened when I first got diagnosed, being a medical doctor, I just took a deep dive into the scientific literature. I wanted to find every single thing that I could do naturally that could help me in this battle. So I started accumulating all this information. I started taking different herbal supplements. I was exercising every day. I was making sure I got 8 hours of sleep every day. And about a year after I got diagnosed, so this was about a year after I started my treatment, I decided I was going to give a lecture to teach people about all these different things that I was learning about how you could do things in a natural way to help in your battle against cancer. So I had been interviewed many times in the Pittsburgh area from different television stations about plastic surgery procedures and med spa procedures. So there was one anchor person that I knew real well, and I called her and I said, "Hey, could you do a little story on my cancer? I'm going to be giving a lecture, and this might get some people to come to the hotel." So she came in, she did a really good story. A lot of people saw it, and I had 125 people show up for this lecture. So it was, we were totally surprised. We were pulling chairs in. we just weren't really prepared for that many people to show up for this lecture that I gave. So I gave my talk. I don't know how I dragged this thing on for 2 hours, but it was a 2-hour lecture. And after I was done, I had a standing ovation. I've never had a standing ovation for anything, but I really think the reason I got that ovation is because there were a lot of cancer patients in the audience.
Yes.
And I think they, at that point, before they came to the lecture, I think they felt that they were just at the mercy of the surgery, the radiation, the chemotherapy, and there wasn't anything they could do on their own. I remember one woman came up to me after the lecture, and she actually had multiple myeloma, and she was definitely obese. I mean, she was very overweight. And she told me, "Hey, listen, I went to my oncologist and I said, hey, should I change my diet or anything?" And he said, "Oh, just keep eating the way you're eating. You'll do fine." And she told me, she said, "I just knew that wasn't right. That couldn't be right." I mean, she just knew instinctively that just wasn't the right thing to say. So from that point, I started to have monthly meetings in one of my med spas, and I would get about 75 to 100 people every month. I was inviting speakers coming in, and they were basically talking about how plant-based diets can help you restore not only your cardiovascular system, but also help you in the fight against cancer. And people kept asking me, because I had all this knowledge, "Hey, are you going to write a book? Are you going to write a book?" So this was Memorial Day. This is about 6 months after I gave this lecture. I started to write every morning for about an hour. I had a writing coach that told me if I write every morning, I could get the average person writes about 900 words in an hour. And she said, if you do that every morning, you could have a short book done in a month. You could have a medium book done in 2 months and a long book done in 3 months. So I did that. I'd wake up every morning, and I'm a morning person. So I would just spew out these words pretty quickly because it was all in my head. And by Labor Day, the book was completely done. I had it on Amazon first week of November. And then when I started these meetings and so forth, I developed a website. It's called naturalinsightsintocancer.com. I have a bunch of blogs on there, a bunch of videos. I started an Instagram site. It's called Cancer Veggie Doc. If anybody is on Instagram, I have about 37,000 followers on there. I do a post.
Say it again, because we want this in the show notes.
Yeah, my Instagram site is Cancer Veggie Doc.
Okay.
So Cancer, VEGGIE Doc, DOC. I have 37,000 followers on my Instagram account. And then my website is naturalinsightsintocancer.com. And the insights is INSIGHTS. So it all runs together. And I also have TikTok and Facebook. I do all of that. So I'm pretty heavily involved with social media because it's a great way to get your message out there. But it's been great being able to do, I do a lot of cancer coaching. I do virtual consults for people that are struggling with cancer. I also do weight loss consults also, because when your BMI is high, you are much more prone to getting cancer and really all kind of chronic diseases. So I do that. And then I also do, lab testing for people. I check 70 plus biomarkers of health. I check things like your C-reactive protein, your IGF-1, which is your one of your growth hormones, hemoglobin A1C, your omega-6 to omega-3 levels. I check all your vitamin levels, minerals, amino acids, heavy metals. So I do all of that virtually through the internet and also through FaceTime.
That is incredible. What we'll do, we'll leave the links to your website. I believe your website has a lot of information, very, very, very thorough. Can people order those consults right on your website?
Yes, I have an area where people they basically just, there's a little box and they check it off. So the different things I have on there You can get a 1 hour virtual consult or a 2 hour virtual consult. And then after that, I have, I call it 24/7 access to me through email and texting. What was happening after I would do these virtual consults is that people would text me, and I didn't have a problem with that, but sometimes it started to get a little out of hand. And on the other hand, there were people that wanted to text me, but they felt like they were bothering me. So I talked to my web designer, and he said, you probably should come up with some kind of a price on that. It's $20 a month, which really, he thought it should be more than that. But this really is a passion project for me. So every day I get a ton of text messages from patients. So, and I enjoy it. And those patients that do the 24/7 access to me, every couple of weeks, I throw them out a text anyway. How's it going? Things going okay? Any questions? So I try to keep in contact with them. And then I have another box for the lab testing. And then I have another box if somebody wants a weight loss virtual consult with me. And those are usually about an hour. And then I also like for those patients to have 24/7 access so that I can kind of monitor what they're doing over a 6-month period, so I can get them to their to the goal that they have.
Beautiful, beautiful. You're making it so accessible for people. We've talked about healthcare. One of the biggest problems is people having access to quality doctors and quality information. And
I mean, I think one of the good things that came out of COVID is that a lot of doctors that didn't know how to use technology, all of a sudden they started using technology, Zoom meetings. And I know my oncologist, I never go in to see him. I always do it virtually, with him. So it saves me a trip in. I got to pay for parking. I mean, it's just so much nicer being able to talk to him. And I know as a physician, you're a physician, when I go in there physically, he's listening to my heart and he's, listening to my abdomen. I know it's all show. So, basically with my disease, you pretty much look at the numbers, and if the numbers stay stable, that everything is fine. You're not having any pain in your bones or anything. That everything is stable when you're in a good health situation.
Tell us about your diet. Now, it's very plant-based. I get that, but what else? Just give us a snapshot of a day.
Well, this morning I had steel cut oatmeal with blackberries, blueberries, raspberries, and it's raspberries, strawberries, blackberries, blueberries. So that's how I kind of keep that, the dark ones and then the bright ones. But I did that with some cinnamon. But the way I start my day, I do intermittent fasting. So I eat my last food at about 8 o'clock at night.
Okay.
And then I don't really eat until noon. But when I wake up, this morning, for instance, I woke up at about 5:30. I got about 7.5 hours of sleep. There's a special coffee that I make, and I actually have it in my book. And I am really big into freeze-dried powders. There's 12 different freeze-dried fruit powders that I actually put in my coffee. It's cacao. I put raspberry, strawberry, blackberry, blueberry, like acai, goji berry, pomegranate berry, grape skin powder. And then I put a little stevia in there just to give it a little sweetness. And 2 little shots of like shakes of clove, and then 20 shakes of a Ceylon cinnamon. And my cup is about 24 ounces. So I use a Keurig, and I use a light roast organic that I actually get from Costco's. And I do recommend, if you're going to get coffee, I really think that's the best way to purchase your coffee. When it's light roast, there's more antioxidants in there. However, if it's not organic, there would be more pesticides in it. So when you get light roast, it's high antioxidant, with organic, you also don't have any pesticides in the coffee. So the Keurig fills it up to about 12 ounces, and then I add a cup of soy milk. And when I wake up in the morning, I do all my computer work. So as I'm doing that, I sip that, and you do have to kind of stir it a little bit, a wee little bit thick. When I get about halfway done, I add another cup of soy milk. Now, for those of your listeners that think that people that eat whole food plant-based don't get enough protein, just when I finish the coffee, and when I fill it up for the second time with the soy milk, I've calculated I've already consumed 27 grams of protein and 12 grams of fiber, and I haven't really even started my day. And I do consider that I'm still in my fasting state. And one of the other reasons I like to do it during kind of in the middle of my fasting state is studies are showing that when you get chemotherapy, for example, in a fasted state, chemo actually works better. Walter Longo is one of the world's experts on fasting. And he started with rodent studies. And he showed that if you fasted the rodent 24 hours before the chemo, and then you continued to fast them 24 hours after the chemo, that they had much less side effects, number one, and secondly, the chemo worked much better. Now, my freeze-dried powders, the reason I consider those like chemo is that most people may not realize this, but plants have over 100,000 phytonutrients in them. They're phytochemicals that have very potent anti-cancer effects. In my book, in the chapter on plants, I go through all the different ways that plants actually fight cancer. You know, they disrupt cell signaling between the cancer cells. They cause cancer cell suicide. They disrupt the cell cycle during the cancer cells replication phase. They disrupt angiogenesis, which is the production of blood vessels that the cancer creates so that it can spread. It's a proteasome inhibitor. It inhibits the cancers from being able to metabolize misfolded proteins. So the cancer actually dies because all these proteins start accumulating inside of the cancer cell. So they have all these amazing properties. Well, when you use a freeze-dried powder, for instance, let's take blueberry freeze-dried powder. 1 gram of freeze-dried blueberry powder is the equivalent of eating 50 grams of blueberries. Because most people don't realize this, but fruit is about 90% water. So when they do the freeze-dried powder process, they're getting rid of all of the water, and they're getting it into a powder form, and it retains all of its nutrient power. So when I do that in the morning, I am getting like a super boost of phytonutrients. Now, let me just give you one study that'll blow your mind, because there's a lot of them on these different fruit powders. But there was an Asian study came out about 10 years ago, and they gave people with early esophageal cancer. And for those of you in the audience that don't know, esophageal cancer is the second most deadly cancer, second to pancreatic cancer. So they gave these individuals a 1/4 cup of freeze-dried strawberry powder every day for 6 months. And what they found was 80.6% had reversal of the cancer. And this was all shown through photography, through endoscopy. 50% had total elimination, which is mind-blowing. There's other studies on freeze-dried raspberry powder that have very similar results. So anytime I'm counseling cancer patients, I recommend that they use them. If they want to throw them in their smoothies, they can do it in their smoothies. But I do think they should incorporate at least 4 or 5 of these freeze-dried powders in either their coffee or their smoothies every morning. And then after that, when I'm getting ready in the morning, I have it's kind of a combo. There's 5 different teas that I use. There's chamomile, dandelion, hibiscus, green tea, and a red clover, and I kind of put them all together, and I kind of put a little Ceylon cinnamon stick in there. And as I'm and I put a little bit of lemon juice and lima juice in there. So while I'm getting ready in the morning, I'm kind of sipping on that. And all 5 of those teas I have heavily researched. I mean, all the science is in my book. I have over 500 scientific references in my book. So any supplement that I do, and I do 30 plus supplements, they're mainly herbal supplements, and I could talk a little bit about those if you want. But the reason I do a lot of different supplements, or like why I put 5 teas together, or why I put 12 freeze-dried powders together, is the science is very clear that when you combine these phytonutrients, you get this crazy and amazing synergistic effect. Just kind of give you an example. There was one study that they did, it was in one of the journals, where they had breast cancer cells growing in a petri dish, and they applied a grape extract to the cancer cells, and it killed about 25% of the cancer cells. Then they applied an onion extract, and that killed about 50% of the cancer cells. So then they took a 50-50 solution, and you would figure it would kill, probably 35%. It would be somewhere in between. No, it killed 75%. So there's this synergy that happens with these phytochemicals. And that's why I always recommend people, when they eat a salad, don't just put lettuce, tomatoes, and carrots in there. Put maybe 2 broccoli, 2 cauliflower, put some corn, some carrots, put some cucumbers in there, maybe a couple cucumbers. My salads, I always show my salads to my patients during the virtual consults. I have 25 different vegetables in my salads. So it's, so my diet, to kind of give you an idea of a typical day. Today I had at noon, I actually start with my supplements. So before I take my supplements, and I know this is going to sound like it's totally obsessive compulsive, but it gets back to that whole synergy thing. Before I take them, I take my nuts and seeds, which I think are very, very beneficial to your health. I do 2 walnuts, 2 almonds, 2 pecans, 2 hazelnuts. Wow. I do a few peanuts. I do a little bit of pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds. I do a macadamia nut. So, and the reason I'm doing that, and people should eat a handful of nuts per day. It's very, very healthy for you. But I want to, instead of getting a handful of walnuts, I want to get a little bit of each to get that synergistic effect between all of these different nuts. So I do it for the health benefits, but also anytime, and your listeners need to know this, anytime you take supplements, you really should take some kind of fat with it, because if you don't, your fat soluble vitamins are not going to get absorbed. So the nuts have, a little bit of saturated fat, a lot of monounsaturated fat, and then polyunsaturated fat. So that'll help absorb the, carotenoids, the vitamin E, the vitamin D, anything that's fat soluble that I'm taking. Turmeric is the one supplement that I really recommend every cancer patient take. In fact, I think everybody should take turmeric. Yes. I mean, there are over 12,000 clinical studies on turmeric, and it has amazing anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer effects. And it really affects cancer from the progression all the way to metastasis. It has an anti-cancer effect at every one of those stages. But if you don't ingest turmeric with some kind of fat, it will not get absorbed well. And the other thing I always recommend people use a black pepper extract. It's called pepperine. Studies show that it significantly increases the bioavailability, not only the absorption, but also it negates some of the body's ability to metabolize the turmeric quickly. So you get much higher levels in your blood. So that's kind of how I start my day. But then after that, today I had the steel cut oats with all those different berries with the cinnamon. I haven't had lunch yet. A lot of times I won't even really eat lunch, but my wife is an amazing vegan cook. she's been on board with me from the beginning. And if you read my book, she was diagnosed actually with Hodgkin's lymphoma when she was 28.
Oh.
So, and we were married for a year when all this happened. So we got off to it was a pretty rocky way to start your marriage, but it made us stronger, and it made our relationship a lot stronger. To, we've been married for, it'll be 35 years in October. But she got on board with the whole, initially she didn't until I got diagnosed. So then she started to learn. She has all these different cookbooks, and on my IG story, a lot of times I'll show what I'm eating and so forth. But probably when I'm done here, I saw her making a vegan egg salad. So I'll probably go in and maybe grab one of those. And then, every evening she really makes amazing dishes with all of the different cookbooks that she has. And when I do my consults, that's one of the things I always make sure that I do. I give them I take photos of all these different cookbooks, and I send them to the patients.
Oh, beautiful.
And then there's a bunch of different websites that they can use. So a lot of it is, transitioning into eating a little bit more plant-based. And just for your listeners, you don't have to go fully plant-based. I think if you at least eat about an 85% plant-based diet, you're going to be much healthier. I really like people to read the Blue Zones book. Have you ever read that book before,
Yes,
Mary?
Yes.
Yeah, and when I tell patients and people in general, because right now there's a lot of hype on social media. There's a carnivore diet, keto diet, paleo diet. People get so confused. They just really don't know what's going on, because you can take one study that was not designed properly, and then you can make a whole, hey, your doctors have been wrong all these years. Saturated fat is good for you. And we know from the preponderance of evidence over thousands of clinical studies that high saturated fat diets are definitely very, very bad for the cardiovascular system. They definitely jack up your LDL. There's no question on that. But when people get into all these different diets and all this confusion, I say, hey, listen, look at the Blue Zones. There's 5 areas of the world where people live the longest: Icaria, Greece, Sardinia, Okinawa, Nicoya, Costa Rica, and Loma Linda in our own United States, California. That's where the Seventh-day Adventists live. And Seventh-day Adventists, just kind of give you an idea, they live in America, so they're kind of in the same, cultural situation as everybody else in this country. Women live 10 years longer than the other women in America, and the men live 14 years longer than the other men in America.
Wow.
And they eat a vegetarian diet. A lot of the other Blue Zones eat anywhere from a 90 to 95% plant-based diet. So if they eat meat, it's once, maybe twice a week. It's about the size of a deck of cards. They move a lot. A lot of them are exercising a lot. They're, on the farms, going, climbing up hills. They get a lot of sleep. They basically wake up when the sun comes out. They don't wake up to an alarm clock. They have really good social ties. And a lot of these people don't even have a cell phone. So they don't know the whole new craze. They don't know about the carnivore diet, the keto diet. They don't know any of that stuff. All they know is that they live a certain type of life that is primarily plant-based, and it's more of a stress-reduced life. But once again, if you go to Loma Linda, which is in America, and they're exposed to a lot of the stresses that we are, they have a much higher lifespan and health span compared to the rest of us. So once again, if you can keep your diet more plant strong, that's a word I like to use, because you can eat, for instance, a keto diet that's plant predominant. You can eat a paleo diet that's plant predominant. I mean, you can eat a lot of these different diets, but make it a plant predominant, because we do know that cultures and research cohort groups that eat more plant-based definitely have a much lower all-cause mortality and less premature death. One other thing I just wanted to kind of point out, because I've been focusing a lot of my attention on the gut microbiome. And when you throw the word fiber out there rather than plant, it kind of negates this whole argument, hey, I'm a vegan, I'm a carnivore, I mean, these groups get so passionate. I don't even like the word vegan, because you can be a vegan and be eating Oreo cookies and drinking Coke all day. So you can be a very unhealthy vegan. So I hate that word. I like to use the word whole food, plant-based. But what is fascinating to me, and I've been delving into this very deeply, is fiber's effect on the microbiome. Most people don't realize we have about 37 trillion bacteria in our gut. How many cells do you think we have in our body? Take a guess. About 37 trillion.
37 trillion.
We almost have as many, and I've read some statistics that we actually have more gut bacteria than we do cells in our body. And you basically have two different types of gut bacteria. You have the good bacteria. They're called, the Prevotella is kind of the head group. There's about 500 subspecies. Then you have Bacteroidetes, and then there's about 500 subspecies under that. And what we're finding is when you eat a high fiber diet, the number of Prevotella, the good bacteria, go up dramatically and snuff out the bad bacteria. When you eat a lot of meat, dairy, ultra-processed foods, the bad Bacteroidetes bacteria accumulate and they snuff out the good bacteria. And those bad bacteria, I mean, they release a lot of toxic endotoxins and secondary bile acids that definitely have been shown to be carcinogenic. An interesting study came out it was in Lancet, and it was one of the largest studies I've ever seen on fiber. It looked at 185 well-done prospective studies, and 135 million person years. And what they found was the highest consumers of fiber compared to the lowest consumers had a 30% reduction in premature death. So these bacteria, these good bacteria, release these amazing chemicals called short chain fatty acids. There's three basic ones. There's propionate, acetate, and the other one, acetate, propionate, acetate, and it'll come to me in 1 second. Probably in a minute, I'll be able to tell it to you, but there's three short chain fatty acids. And these short chain fatty acids do amazing things. They release these very potent anti-inflammatory chemicals. They actually control about 70% of your immune function. They actually send signals across the colon's thin layer of cells, and they actually tell the immune cells actually what to do, where to go. It's just incredible how these bacteria control our immune system. It really is mind-blowing. And for a lot of your maybe female patients that are concerned about weight loss, even male patients, it has an incredible effect on your appetite. It secretes LGP1, PYY, leptin. All of these control your appetite. In fact, last night I posted on my Instagram an interesting study, and they've repeated this study hundreds of times. They took identical twins. One was fat, one was thin. They did a fecal transplant of the fat twin into a thin mouse, and the thin mouse got fat. Then they took the stool from the thin twin. They did a fecal transplant into the fat mouse, and it got skinny. And they've done that with mice also. They've taken a fat mouse and did a fecal transplant into the skinny mouse, and the skinny mouse got fat, and vice versa. So the microbiome has this amazing effect on your metabolism and your appetite. And that is why vegans, if you look at the EPIC Oxford study and the HS2 study, they were the only group that had ideal BMI. They were the only group that had a BMI under 25. They also had the lowest blood pressures. The next group were vegetarians, and it was pescatarians and omnivores. Were I think omnivores averaged like 28.8 their BMI. But I think that's one of the reasons why people that eat more plant-based actually are typically leaner. I mean, if you look right now, I'm in Miami Beach. I spend the winters in Miami. I have a condo here, and every morning I walk on the beach and I say my prayers, and it's a really great time. But I look at all the men on the beach, and every one of them has a beer belly. Like there's hardly anybody that is lean. And one of the reasons is that most people are eating a standard American diet. And, 65% processed foods, 25% meat and dairy, and about anywhere from 6 to 10% fruits and vegetables. So they're not getting much fiber, and they're eating food that is nutritionally low and calorically high, rather than plant foods, which are nutritionally high and calorically low. So, in fact, yesterday there's a little outdoor gym after I do my walk. I go and I do this little workout every day. And there was a guy, he was about my age, and he was lean. So I went over and I asked him, I go, hey, what kind of a diet do you eat? And he ate a plant-based diet. So, because I was kind of curious, because most of the people I see here, they're walking on the beach, all the guys have a beer belly. So there aren't that many that, especially when they get my age. So, it's kind of interesting. So
this is such important information. When we're finished, I want to have the link to your website, but also the link to your book. Where do we get your book?
Well, you can get my book on either Amazon. I have it in Kindle. It's also an audio. You can get hardback, paperback, or you can get it on my website. When people get it on my website, I do give them a signed copy. So that's probably the only advantage. The price is about the same on my website as it is on Amazon.
Okay.
If your listeners do buy it on Amazon, though, I would encourage them, if they could write a review, I would appreciate that, because it does help. I think I have like 75 reviews on there now. I would like to get that over 100, because
definitely
it does make a huge difference once you hit 100. So if they could do that, I would greatly appreciate that.
Okay, excellent. This is such important information. And Dr. Dominic, we don't hear it enough. We really don't. You're going into the depth. You're in the weeds here, the nuances. And honestly, people don't know. We are bombarded with health information, but one conflicts the other.
Here's the problem. A lot of it has to do with social media. If I do a post and I say broccoli's healthy, that's not going to get that many viral hits, because everybody knows broccoli's healthy. It's not, people have been saying that for years. But if I say your doctors have been wrong all these years, eating a lot of meat is really healthy for you, then all of a sudden you're going to get like a ton of hits. And you can always cherry pick articles. For instance, if you pick any topic and you look at 40 articles on that topic, just through random chance, you're going to get maybe 2 or 4 that are going to show an opposite result than the preponderance of the evidence. And you can do a whole social media post on, hey, look at this article, look what it showed, and you look like you're a scientist. But meanwhile, the preponderance of the evidence shows that, for instance, if you eat a saturated fat diet that is over 10% of your saturated fat intake, your LDL is going to go up. And there is no question. If you look at every study, in fact, recently over the last 5 years, there have been 8 Mendelian randomization studies. And what that means is they're genetic studies, people that are born with high LDL or born with low LDL. And every one of them shows that as the LDL goes up, it's a straight line. It's the cardiovascular death goes up, the chance of getting a heart attack or stroke, it's a straight linear line. And in the last 5 years, there have been like 28 prospective clinical studies that show the exact same thing. It's a straight linear line. So when your LDL goes up, the cardiovascular events go up. And for instance, there's a book called The Carnivore Code. Dr. Paul Saladino wrote it. I heard him, he was interviewed on Joe Rogan, and he was bragging that his LDL was 535.
Oh, gee.
Your LDL should be 80 or below if you want to prevent any kind of cardiovascular event. And he's promoting this carnivore diet. And there are young people that are going to listen to him because he does spew out some cherry-picked articles, and they're going to eat that way. And some of these people are going to end up having a cardiovascular event when they're 35 or 40. So I think a lot of this confusion comes from social media, but also comes from the food industry, because they fund a lot of these articles, that these scientific articles that really aren't science. They're really marketing. And they design the study in a way that I could read the study design and tell you what the result's going to be. So and one thing that most people don't know is about 95% of food industry funded studies come out positive for the industry that's funding it.
Absolutely.
And if the study is coming out the way that they don't want it to come out, they're actually allowed to just like stop the study. So a lot of the misinformation, a lot of the confusion, I think comes from social media, but I also think it comes from food industry funded kind of what I would call fake science. So if you are exposed to an article that says saturated fat is good for you, you get confused and you go, you know what? Nobody knows what the heck's going on. I'm just going to keep eating the way that I've been eating my whole life. So a lot of it is just creating enough confusion that people just throw their hands up and they just say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to keep doing what I was doing before. When really, when you really delve into the science, it's very clear that the more plants you eat, the healthier your gut microbiome, the lower the chances of dying prematurely. You're going to have a long health span. You know, these people what's interesting, we talked about the blue zones. I ran into a doctor from Nicoya, Costa Rica. This was about 2 years ago. I took my 2 daughters and my wife to Cabo San Lucas. We did a little vacation at a Hard Rock Cafe, and they had it was a moped, little kind of a thing that we did, an excursion type thing. And we had a lunch, and I was sitting next to this doctor from Nicoya, Costa Rica. So my eyes lit up when he said it, when he was from. I go, hey, you're one of the blue zones. And I said, is it true that people in Nicoya live, really long? He goes, oh yeah. He goes, it's crazy. He said, you'll be like talking to a guy that's like over 100 years old. He's 80 years old. He's riding a horse or riding a bike. And well, I said, how do these people die? Because obviously we all die. And he said, they're not like the Americans, where for the last 10, 20 years of our life, we have, all these chronic diseases, diabetes, we're getting hip replacements, knee replacements, we're having heart attacks, stents. He said, it's not like that. He said, they might get like a pneumonia and like 3 days later they're dead, or, they just go to sleep and have a heart attack and they die. It's not like they have this long period of chronic disease. It's like they have a very long health span, not only lifespan, but also health span. And it's really what I was saying before, how these people eat. They basically eat very, very, plant-based, and they do a lot of things I actually talk about in my book. My 5 principles are basically a plant-based diet, targeted supplements, getting quality sleep, stress reduction, and then and under the exercise, I talk about intermittent fasting, which I do think really has a very potent anti-cancer effect. There was one study it was actually one of the first studies done on intermittent fasting in relationship to cancer. And they basically took breast cancer patients and they broke them into 2 groups. One fasted 13 hours or more every night. The other group fasted 13 hours or less. And the group that fasted more than 13 hours actually had a 36% reduction in relapse rates. So I do incorporate that. That's kind of one of the 6 principles, but I do kind of incorporate that under exercise, because exercise for all of your listeners, is probably one of the most important things next to your diet that you can do, because when you exercise, I always tell people stress reduction is one of them, but when you exercise, you feel less stressed. And sleep is one of the 5 principles that I talk about. When you exercise, you sleep better.
Exactly.
And when you look at the statistics, especially with breast cancer, you know, a lot of your listeners might be females that maybe are struggling with breast cancer. But there's one study that I have in my book that is actually mind-blowing. First off, if you exercise routinely, you're going to have about a 10 to 35% reduction in even getting cancer in the first place, all different types of cancer. But with breast cancer patients, there was this one interesting study. If women just did brisk walking daily, they would, for about a mile, they would reduce their risk of a relapse by about 20%. It was actually 24%. If they ran 2/3 of a mile, they would reduce their risk by 40%. And then if they ran 2.3 miles a day, they would reduce their chance of a breast cancer relapse by 95%.
Wow.
I mean, that's almost hard to even believe, but it's true. I mean, it was a very well done study. And I always tell patients that tell me they don't have time to exercise. One of the studies I quote in my book is that even 6 minutes of exercise jacks up your natural killer cell activity by 50%. That and natural killer cells are the cells that kill cancer cells. So, you know, for instance, I do a 15-minute resistance band workout every day. Like after I get back from that little gym thing that I do in the walk on the beach, I just go through this. I hit every muscle group in about 15 minutes. But some days I don't feel like doing it. So if like in those kind of situations, I'll just cut in half. Instead of doing 15 minutes, I'll do 7.5 minutes. Like instead of doing 40 reps, I'll do 20 reps. And I know that I'm jacking up my immune system for that day. And it's amazing how it just gives you a boost of energy too when you do that. So they're the 5 principles in my book. You know, I kind of go through them all. There's a ton of clinical studies that I have throughout the book. So if anybody's interested, it's a really good read. It's a fast read. I think I write in a way that you know, an average person can understand. I don't really use all the doctor jargon, whatever. So people can understand, you know, how cancer is caused and what are the things we need to do to prevent a relapse. So I think they would find it very, very informative.
This has been incredible. I just thank you so much on behalf of our listeners. I mean, you have unpacked so much that's essential.
Oh, I appreciate it. I could go on forever, but I know we got to cut this short. So
pearls for health. What we will do is strongly encourage our listeners to get on the website. We'll have the link, naturalinsightsintocancer.com. And then, Dr. Brandy, we will have your book, the link to your book. And if you want them to go to Amazon and then write a review, let's
right, exactly.
Boost up those reviews.
Pardon me?
We'll boost up those reviews.
Yeah, I need to get up to 100. So if I can get there, that'd be awesome. But I think I'm up to 75 now. So
that sounds awesome. Well, you've done so much. You know, really, you cut right to the chase.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
But you got the depth of the scientific knowledge. This is all research based.
Yeah, I always try to stay away from anecdotes because when you really go through the science and you look at the preponderance of the evidence, it just gives people more confidence that what you're saying is factual.
It's true.
And once again, that was the thing that really got me eating whole food plant-based in the first place. You know, Dr. Greger, I would recommend everybody reading his book, How Not to Die. But like I said, if you get the hardback, it's about 2 inches thick and 1 inch of it are scientific references. Wow. I mean, I don't know how many are in there. There's got to be thousands of scientific references in his book. And he has a really great website that I always recommend my patients to go on. It's called nutritionfacts.org.
Nutrition.
Nutritionfacts.org. Okay. And Dr. Greger has there's probably over 6,000 5-minute
Wow.
videos on there. He has a group of 20 scientists that review every single article in the clinical nutritional literature. Last year, they reviewed 190,000 articles. Like, I divided that by 52. That's 3,600 articles a week. And then what they do is they take all the science and then they make these little 5-minute videos that Dr. Greger narrates. And when you get on the website, you sign up for free and they send you a free video every single day. Like right now, I think I have like 10 of them I got to go through. So what I'll do is a lot of times in the evening, I'll just say, okay, today's my Dr. Greger night. So I'll just sit there and I'll just go through all the videos. But he has great videos on cancer, cardiovascular disease,
really,
gluten sensitivity, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis. I mean, you name it. You just go in at the top, you type in a topic, and there'll be all kind of videos that pop up. But it's a phenomenal resource for people, and that is extremely important because if you're going to make a change in your diet, you have to know why you're doing it.
Exactly.
So education is really important. That's why I always recommend that, hey, every day, if you can listen to one of his videos, or at least, once a week, maybe listen to 3 or 4 of them, just to kind of reinforce why you're giving up the chicken wings. So you have to know why you're doing what you're doing, because it's hard for people to change their diets. And, there's a really good book that I recommend. It's called The Vegan Starter Kit. If people do want to try to make a gradual change, it's a great book. It's real thin. Neil Bernard wrote the book, but it's a really easy way to, gradually maybe add like a plant-based meal maybe once a week. Maybe you do a plant-based breakfast one week, and then you add a plant-based lunch. And then before you know it, 7 weeks, you're eating primarily plant-based. But it's a really good book if somebody wants to kind of gradually start adding more plant foods to their diet.
This is awesome. Absolutely awesome. Thank you so much. I mean,
it's my pleasure.
So much in a short period of time. We will have the links in the show notes, and
I appreciate that.
Strongly encourage your listeners to get your book and start implementing. So
appreciate that. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Been a lot of fun.
All right, then.
Okay, take care.
Again. All right, then.
My pleasure.